Rock Hudson revealed the 5 men he had an affair with. In the golden age of Hollywood, few stars shined brighter than Rock Hudson. With his chiseled jaw, towering 6'5" frame, and magnetic screen presence, Hudson embodied the American masculine ideal, the quintessential leading man who made women swoon and men aspire to his seemingly effortless charm and confidence. For millions of moviegoers in the 1950s and 60s, Rock Hudson wasn't just a movie star. He was the definition of what a man should be. This carefully constructed image made Hudson one of Hollywood's most bankable stars and required him to live one of the industry's most elaborate lies behind the manufactured romance of his brief studio-arranged marriage, and his on-screen chemistry with leading ladies like Doris Day lay a profoundly different reality. Rock Hudson was gay, living a necessarily secretive private life in an era when exposure would have instantly destroyed his career and possibly led to criminal prosecution. Rock lived in a prison of his own fame, explained a longtime friend who was part of Hudson's trusted inner circle. He had created this persona that was worth millions of dollars to the studios, but that same persona made it impossible for him to live authentically. The bigger he became as a star, the more dangerous it became for him to be himself. When Hudson died of AIDS-related complications in 1985, he became the first major celebrity publicly associated with the disease, forcing America to reckon with both the epidemic and, gradually, with the reality of Hudson's sexual orientation. In the decades since, the full picture of Hudson's private life has slowly emerged through memoirs, legal proceedings, and the testimonies of those who knew him intimately. What most people don't understand is that Rock didn't have casual encounters, he had relationships, revealed a former assistant who worked closely with Hudson in his later years. These weren't just fleeting affairs or anonymous trysts. He formed deep attachments, fell genuinely in love, and created as much of a domestic life as was possible given the extreme constraints he lived under. Today, we explore 5 of the most significant relationships in Rock Hudson's life. Connections that range from passionate romance to profound companionship, illuminating the complex reality of a man who spent his life in the spotlight while keeping his heart in the shadows. Rock Hudson's relationships reveal far more than just the hidden romantic life of a Hollywood icon. They provide a poignant window into the psychological and emotional reality of living a divided existence during one of America's most sexually repressive eras. Each of these significant connections represented not just love or companionship, but extraordinary risk in a time when exposure meant career death and potential criminal prosecution. Hudson navigated these relationships with elaborate secrecy, creating a parallel life known only to a trusted few, while projecting a carefully constructed heterosexual image to the millions who idolized him. The men who shared Hudson's private world faced their own challenges, loving someone they could never publicly acknowledge, understanding they would always be officially invisible, participating in complex deceptions necessary for mutual protection. Through these relationships, we glimpse not just Rock Hudson, the secret gay man, but Rock Hudson the being, someone seeking the same connection, understanding, and intimacy we all desire, forced to pursue the confines of a double life, took an immense psychological...
How did Rock Hudson date? He would come over at lunchtime, I'd come back from work, and we got to lunch. He never seemed to be uptight about it in public.
The final companion, Mark Christian. Of all Rock Hudson's relationships, none became more publicly known or more controversial than his connection with Mark Christian. As Hudson's last significant partner, Christian was thrust into the spotlight after Hudson's death in 1985, becoming both a symbol of the AIDS crisis and a central figure in a landmark legal case that raised profound questions about privacy, disclosure, and responsibility. His most famous lover, a young man 20 years his junior, noted celebrity biographer Thomas Henderson. Christian wasn't famous when they met, but their relationship would eventually make legal history and force America to confront the reality of both Hudson's sexuality and the AIDS epidemic in ways no one could have anticipated. Christian, a handsome blonde in his 20s, met Hudson in 1982 when the actor was 56 years old and already an established legend in Hollywood. Though no longer at the peak of his film career, Hudson remained a powerful figure in the industry, having successfully transitioned to television with his hit series Macmillan and Wife, and numerous guest appearances on popular shows. According to those familiar with their relationship, the connection between Hudson and Christian was immediate and intense, quickly evolving from casual dating to a serious partnership. Within months, Christian had moved into Hudson's Beverly Hills mansion, establishing what was effectively a domestic partnership, though one that remained carefully hidden from public view. Lived with Rock in the final years of his life, Henderson continued. This wasn't just a casual relationship. They shared a home, traveled together, and by all accounts, Hudson was deeply in love. It was perhaps the most open relationship he had allowed himself in decades, though open is relative when you're still maintaining a public facade of heterosexuality. Their relationship coincided with the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, a time of growing fear but limited understanding of the disease. According to legal documents that would later become public, Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS in June 1984, but kept this diagnosis secret from Christian while continuing their sexual relationship until February 1985, when the couple separated for unrelated reasons. What happened next would thrust their private relationship into international headlines. As Hudson's health rapidly deteriorated during the filming of a guest appearance on Dynasty, speculation about his condition grew. In July 1985, he collapsed at the Ritz Hotel in Paris, creating a media frenzy that culminated in the public announcement that Rock Hudson, American icon of masculine virility, had AIDS. The revelation shocked the nation, putting a famous face on a disease that many Americans had previously associated exclusively with marginalized communities. For Christian, however, the news carried a far more personal significance. He learned along with the rest of the world that the man he had loved and lived with had potentially exposed him to a then invariably fatal disease without warning. Sued Hudson's estate after learning he had AIDS, claiming Rock never disclosed his condition, explained legal historian Dr. Rebecca Morton. The lawsuit wasn't simply about money. It raised fundamental questions about the ethical obligations between partners, about the right to privacy versus the right to informed consent, about what we owe to those we love when our own lives are ending. The resulting legal battle became one of the most closely watched cases of its era. Christian's attorneys argued that Hudson had a moral and legal obligation to disclose his condition to a sexual partner, regardless of his desires for privacy or fears about revealing his sexuality. Hudson's estate countered that there was insufficient evidence the actor knew he could transmit the disease, given the limited medical understanding at the time. Awarded a massive settlement, later reduced, noted Morton. The jury initially awarded Christian $21.7 million in damages, which was later reduced to $5.5 million, still an extraordinary sum that established an important legal precedent about disclosure between sexual partners. The case transformed Christian from a private citizen into a controversial public figure. Some viewed him as an opportunist, exploiting Hudson's legacy, while others saw him as a victim standing up for the rights of partners to know their health risks. The reality, according to those who knew both men, was far more complex than either narrative suggested. He wasn't just a lover, he was the man who survived the secret, observed a friend who knew both Hudson and Christian. Mark was thrust into this impossible position of suddenly having his private life exposed, learning his partner had potentially concealed a deadly risk, and then being forced to publicly fight for recognition of their relationship at a time when much of America was still deeply homophobic. Despite testing negative for HIV multiple times, Christian lived with the psychological trauma of potential exposure and the stress of worldwide scrutiny. In the decades following the case, he maintained that his lawsuit was primarily about Hudson's deception rather than his sexuality, arguing that his right to make informed health decisions had been violated by someone who claimed to love him. Christian's complex legacy in relation to Hudson reflects the impossible contradictions of the era, a time when revealing one's sexuality could destroy a career, when AIDS was both deadly and deeply misunderstood, and when legal protections for same-sex partners were virtually non-existent. Their relationship, which began as a private romance, ultimately became a public reckoning with questions of ethics, disclosure, and the human cost of living a divided life. He wasn't just a lover, he was the man who survived the secret. This observation captures the unique position Christian occupied in Hudson's story, not just as his final significant partner, but as the person whose actions after Hudson's death forced America to confront the reality behind the carefully constructed image of one of its most beloved stars, accelerating conversations about both AIDS and homosexuality that might otherwise have taken years longer to enter the mainstream.
You ain't the kind of gal who'd break a date.
No, I'm not.
And I ain't the kind of guy that'd ask you to.
The Secret Boyfriend, Lee Garlington. While Mark Christian's relationship with Rock Hudson eventually became public knowledge through legal proceedings, another significant romance in Hudson's life remained hidden for decades, revealing a very different chapter in the star's carefully compartmentalized existence. Lee Garlington, who dated Hudson in the early 1960s when the actor was at the height of his fame, kept their relationship secret for nearly 30 years after Hudson's death, before finally sharing his story. Rock's boyfriend in the early 1960s, noted film historian Margaret Collins. This was during Hudson's absolute peak as a leading man, the period when he was starring in romantic comedies with Doris Day, playing the quintessential straight heartthrob that had women across America fantasizing about him. The stakes of exposure couldn't have been higher. Garlington, then a young film extra, met Hudson in 1962 through a mutual friend. According to Garlington's later accounts, their connection was immediate and intense, quickly developing into a relationship that lasted for approximately 3 years. Unlike Christian, who lived with Hudson in his final years when the actor had established a more private life away from studio control, Garlington's relationship with Hudson occurred during the most scrutinized period of his career. Relationship kept totally private. Garlington would leave by the back door during visits, explained Collins. They couldn't risk being seen together in any context that might appear romantic. This meant elaborate precautions, separate arrivals at any location, maintaining a careful distance in public, and creating plausible cover stories for their time together. These necessary deceptions created extraordinary strain on their relationship. According to Garlington's later recollections, they never attended parties together as a couple, could not travel openly, and lived in constant fear of exposure. Even within Hudson's home, caution was paramount. Household staff might report suspicious behavior, and unexpected visitors represented potential disaster. He was the most romantic man I ever knew. We couldn't even hold hands in public, Garlington revealed decades after Hudson's death. This poignant observation captures the painful contradiction at the heart of their relationship. Genuine romantic feeling forced to exist entirely in the shadows, with even the smallest gestures of affection restricted to absolute privacy. The psychological impact of such constraints is difficult for contemporary observers to fully comprehend. In an era when homosexuality was classified as a mental illness, criminalized in most states, and considered a moral failing by mainstream society, the couple navigated not just external prejudice, but internalized shame that had been culturally instilled since childhood. It's important to understand that they weren't just hiding from the public or the studios, observed psychologist Dr. James Peterson, who has studied the mental health impacts of living closeted during this era. They were products of their time, carrying the weight of social conditioning that told them their feelings were sick or wrong. The miracle isn't just that they found ways to be together despite external obstacles, but that they found ways to express love at all, despite the internal barriers both had been raised to construct. According to Garlington's later accounts, the relationship included moments of profound tenderness despite these constraints. Hudson, whose public persona emphasized rugged masculinity, revealed a deeply romantic private nature in their relationship. "He gave me roses, and no one ever knew," Garlington recalled in a rare interview decades later. This simple statement illuminates the double life Hudson maintained. The same man who projected uncomplicated heterosexual charm on screen was secretly expressing romantic sentiments that would have shocked his public, conducting a love affair that existed in a parallel universe to his visible life. The relationship reportedly ended when Garlington inadvertently made Hudson feel vulnerable to exposure. According to Garlington, he once opened Hudson's car door at a gas station, a seemingly innocent gesture that nevertheless suggested an intimacy between them that might raise questions. Shortly afterward, Hudson ended the relationship, later telling Garlington he had seen photographs of them together at Hudson's house in the possession of his manager, making him fear blackmail or exposure. "In that era, even the smallest slip could end everything," explained Collins. Hudson lived in constant awareness that his entire career, which represented not just personal success, but the livelihoods of agents, managers, producers, and studio executives who profited from his image, could collapse from a single indiscreet moment. That knowledge created a perpetual state of vigilance that made genuine intimacy almost impossible to sustain. After their breakup, Garlington and Hudson occasionally saw each other on studio lots, but maintained their distance. Garlington eventually married a woman and had children, living a conventionally heterosexual life while keeping his history with Hudson completely private. It was only in the 2000s, decades after Hudson's death, and in a radically changed social landscape that Garlington finally felt able to speak openly about their relationship. "He gave me roses, and no one ever knew." This reflection captures both the genuine romance they shared and the painful reality that such simple expressions of affection had to remain absolutely secret, that even the giving of flowers, a gesture celebrated in Hudson's on-screen romances with women, became in real life an act that had to be hidden from the world, known only to the two men who shared a love they could never publicly acknowledge.
Worked together before on the Macmillan when I knew her. She's terrific.
The trusted guardian, George Nader. Not all of Rock Hudson's significant relationships with men fit neatly into the category of romance. Some occupied more complex territory, deep emotional bonds that blended friendship, loyalty, and occasional intimacy in ways that defied simple categorization. Among these, his decades-long connection with fellow actor George Nader stands out as particularly significant, representing a rare constant in Hudson's compartmentalized life. Fellow actor and longtime friend, noted film historian Robert Anderson. Nader was part of Hudson's innermost circle, one of the very few people who knew the complete Rock, not just fragments of him. Their relationship spanned decades, evolving through different phases, but maintaining a core of absolute trust that was rare in Hudson's necessarily guarded existence. George Nader, like Hudson, was a contract player in the Universal Studio system during the 1950s, a handsome leading man who appeared in numerous films, including Robot Monster and The Female Animal. According to multiple sources familiar with both men, they met on the Universal lot and developed an immediate connection based on their shared experience as gay men navigating the treacherous waters of 1950s Hollywood. Some insiders insist they were lovers in the 50s, protected by the same inner circle, explained Anderson. Whether their relationship included a romantic or sexual component remains somewhat ambiguous in the historical record. What's clear is that they shared an extraordinarily deep bond that went far beyond ordinary friendship, forming part of a mutual support network essential to their survival in an aggressively homophobic industry. This network included several other gay actors and industry professionals who collectively maintained a careful firewall between their private lives and public personas. According to those familiar with this circle, they would cover for each other when necessary, provide alibis, arrange safe social gatherings, and create the appearance of heterosexual dating when required by studios. "He was more than a friend. He was part of the family that kept the secret," observed a makeup artist who worked with both men during the 1950s. "They understood each other in ways that even well-meaning straight friends couldn't. They shared the same fears, the same double consciousness, the same necessity of constant vigilance that created a bond that's hard to categorize in conventional terms." The depth of trust between Hudson and Nader was perhaps most clearly demonstrated by Hudson's decision to name Nader as the heir to his personal papers and correspondence after his death, material that could have revealed deeply private aspects of Hudson's life if made public. Nader inherited Rock's personal papers and letters, noted Anderson. This wasn't just a practical decision. It was an extraordinary act of trust. These documents contained information that could have damaged Hudson's legacy if mishandled, potentially revealing details about his private life that he had worked his entire career to protect. By entrusting them to Nader, Hudson demonstrated absolute confidence in his discretion and judgment. According to multiple sources, Nader took this responsibility extremely seriously, carefully reviewing and ultimately destroying many of the most personal documents to protect Hudson's privacy, even after death. This act of loyalty, placing Hudson's wishes above potential historical or financial value, reflected the profound bond between the two men. Their relationship faced significant challenges over the decades. In 1965, Nader's own acting career was effectively ended when Confidential magazine threatened to publish an article about his arrest at a gay gathering. According to multiple accounts, the scandal was deflected onto Nader to protect Hudson, who was the bigger star and therefore more valuable to the studios. Rather than exposing both men, a deal was reportedly struck where Nader would be the sacrifice, effectively ending his Hollywood career. The remarkable thing is that this apparent betrayal didn't destroy their relationship, observed Anderson. Nader moved to Europe and rebuilt his career there, eventually becoming a successful writer. He and Hudson maintained their close connection despite this professional catastrophe, which speaks to the depth of their bond. In their later years, As both men established more private lives away from the height of fame, they remained constants in each other's worlds, a connection that spanned the entirety of their adult lives and represented one of the few relationships where Hudson could be fully himself without fear or pretense. He was more than a friend. He was part of the family that kept the secret. This observation captures the essence of their bond, not simply friendship or romance, but a deeper kinship born of shared experience, mutual protection, and the creation of a chosen family within which authenticity was possible in a world that demanded constant performance.
This is the story of a middle-aged man who leaves his wife and family, completely changes his physical appearance, and begins life anew. A young man.
The lost love, an unknown Marine. Among the significant relationships in Rock Hudson's life, perhaps the most poignant and mysterious involves a young Marine he allegedly met in the early 1950s. A connection that, according to those who knew Hudson well, represented one of his few experiences of uninhibited, genuine romance before the weight of stardom made such relationships increasingly difficult. Rock was known to visit military bars while filming near the coast, explained celebrity biographer Thomas Henderson. This was during the Korean War era, when military personnel were highly visible in Southern California. For someone like Hudson, still climbing the ladder to stardom, but not yet so famous as to be instantly recognized everywhere, these venues offered relative anonymity and the opportunity to meet men outside the scrutiny of Hollywood. According to multiple sources close to Hudson during this period, he met a young Marine at one such establishment while on location for a film near San Diego in 1952. What began as a casual encounter reportedly developed into something much more significant over several months of clandestine meetings. One friend said Rock fell hard for a quiet blue-collar Marine, but the man disappeared, noted Henderson. Unlike Hudson's relationships with industry insiders who understood the necessary deceptions of Hollywood, this connection apparently had a more straightforward quality to it, something closer to normal dating, albeit conducted with extreme discretion. The Marine, whose name has been lost to history in most accounts, was reportedly deployed to Korea during the ongoing conflict there. According to Hudson's close friends, the actor received word some months later that the young man had been killed in action, devastating Hudson at what was otherwise a time of rising professional success. Rumors suggest he may have died in Korea, devastating Rock, Henderson continued. This tragedy allegedly occurred just as Hudson's career was taking off in a significant way, creating a painful contrast between his professional ascent and personal loss. According to those who knew him then, he couldn't publicly acknowledge or process this grief, forced instead to maintain his carefully constructed image while privately mourning. The timing of this relationship and its tragic end coincides with Hudson's transition from contract player to genuine star, the period when his public image was being most actively shaped by Universal Studios and his agent Henry Wilson. As Hudson's fame increased, the constraints on his private life grew proportionally more restrictive, making the relatively uncomplicated connection he had reportedly shared with the young Marine increasingly impossible to replicate. He was never the same after that. He'd found real love and lost it before anyone even knew, claimed a longtime friend of Hudson's in a later interview. It created a pattern that would follow Rock throughout his life. This division between his authentic self and his public persona, between genuine emotional connection and the performances of normal relationships that his career demanded. What makes this relationship particularly significant in understanding Hudson is how it allegedly shaped his approach to subsequent connections. According to those close to him, this early loss created a certain emotional caution in Hudson, a protective distance that helped him navigate the necessary compartmentalization of his life, but may have made similar depth of feeling more difficult to achieve. The unknown Marine represents not just a personal loss for Hudson, but a symbolic one, the road not taken, the possibility of a more authentic life that circumstances and era made impossible. Had Hudson been an ordinary person rather than a rising star, had the social climate been different, had the young man returned safely from Korea, any of these factors might have created a very different trajectory for Hudson's personal life. He was never the same after that. He'd found real love and lost it before anyone even knew. This observation captures both the depth of Hudson's private grief and the profound isolation created by his circumstances, experiencing a significant romantic loss that he could share with almost no one, mourning in silence while continuing to project the image of carefree bachelor that his career demanded.
The Sea Devil, it was called.
Yeah.
Don't ask me what it was about.
The rumored romance, Tab Hunter. The rumored relationship between Rock Hudson and Tab Hunter represents one of Hollywood's most intriguing might-have-been stories, a connection between two of the era's most popular male stars, both living deeply closeted lives while projecting idealized heterosexual images on screen. Though never confirmed by either man during Hudson's lifetime, persistent accounts from industry insiders suggest the two shared a brief but meaningful relationship that illuminates the complex reality of gay life in 1950s Hollywood. Tab Hunter was also deeply closeted at the time, noted film historian Margaret Collins. Both men were in remarkably similar positions, young, extraordinarily handsome leading men whose careers depended entirely on maintaining a convincing heterosexual facade. If they did indeed have a relationship, it would have required elaborate precautions and absolute secrecy. According to those familiar with Hollywood's gay underground during this period, Hudson and Hunter allegedly connected sometime in the late 1950s when both were at or approaching the peaks of their popularity. Hunter, with his blonde, all-American good looks, had become a teen idol and recording star with hits like Young Love, while Hudson had established himself as a leading man in dramatic films before transitioning to the romantic comedies that would define his greatest popularity. Though both denied any romantic relationship, multiple insiders claim they had a short but passionate affair in the late 50s, explained Collins. This would have been an extraordinary risk for both men, two major stars whose images were built entirely around heterosexual appeal, whose fan bases consisted largely of young women, and whose studios had invested millions in cultivating their personas as ideal boyfriend and husband material. The practical challenges of such a relationship would have been enormous. Both men were under intense scrutiny from fan magazines, studio publicity departments, and gossip columnists constantly seeking personal details about Hollywood's most eligible bachelors. Any hint of impropriety could have triggered investigations that would have ended both careers instantly. "We all knew each other, and we all knew how to keep secrets," Tab Hunter reportedly said years later, after both he and Hudson had been posthumously outed. This cryptic statement, while not confirming any specific relationship, acknowledged the existence of a hidden network of gay actors who recognized and protected each other in an era of intense persecution. This network created what some historians have described as a parallel Hollywood, an invisible community operating behind the glamorous public facade where closeted stars could occasionally find authentic connection and understanding away from the performative heterosexuality their careers demanded. Two matinee idols, pretending for the world, and maybe, briefly, just being honest together, observed Collins. If their rumored relationship did occur, it would have represented an extraordinary moment of authenticity in lives otherwise defined by necessary deception, a brief interval where they could set aside the exhausting performance of straightness and simply be themselves with someone who completely understood their situation. The alleged relationship reportedly ended naturally, rather than through any dramatic break, with both men recognizing the impossibility of maintaining any kind of sustainable connection given their circumstances. They remained friendly colleagues in subsequent years, though carefully maintaining professional distance in public settings. Hunter, who lived until 2018, eventually confirmed his own homosexuality in his 2005 autobiography, Tab Hunter Confidential, though he spoke only in general terms about Hudson, describing him as a friendly acquaintance rather than addressing specific rumors. This discretion reflects the code that governed their generation of gay Hollywood stars. Even decades later, certain confidences remained protected. Two matinee idols, pretending for the world, and maybe, briefly, just being honest together. This observation captures the poignant possibility their rumored connection represents, a rare moment when two men living extraordinarily similar double lives might have found in each other not just physical attraction, but the deeper comfort of complete understanding, a brief respite from the exhausting necessity of constant performance that defined their public existence.